In our climate, hedgehogs suffer from rheumatism, and they will often die of pneumonia in a cold, wet winter. But they are very adaptable animals, and they usually stay healthy if their winter quarters are warm and dry. The woman from the bread and milk house was very pleased that Mattie and Quill were preparing to hibernate in her garden. She padded the top and sides of the flower pot with newspapers and covered it with an old sack, and her husband put an old sink bath over all in such a way that the hedgehogs' winter quarters were protected from rain and wind. He left just enough room for them to crawl in and out under the hedge of the bath. By the beginning of October, the young urchins had wrapped themselves up in sycamore leaves and had curled up together, ready to sleep the winter away. The old boar came for bread and milk for a few more evenings, then he too looked around for a suitable place to hibernate. He chose an old sea box full of drifted leaves in a derelict greenhouse at the edge of the waste. The autumn was fine and dry. The days were bright and sunny, and the nights were crisp with frost. The haws shone scarlet in the hedges, and the old men shook their heads as old men do, muttering that it was going to be a hard winter. The brambles on the waste were laden with purple blackberries, and the hazels were weighed down by their clusters of golden brown nuts. On the hillside the ploughs turned over the rich red earth, which was quickly dyed to crimson by the autumn dews. The fields spread in a bright patchwork over the landscape until they faded into a purple foothills of Dartmoor. On the moor itself the swaling fires were lit, and the sweet smell of their smoke drifted down the valley on the breeze. On the edge of the waste, the local boys started to build their fire in readiness for the 5th of November. They went round all the houses in the lane, collected old horsehair mattresses, broken down chairs, old newspapers and other suitable materials. The boys piled it all up high with a guy made of a straw-packed old suit covered by a turnip head on the top. The guy had a Catherine wheels pinned to its cheeks, and it was smoking a Roman candle. There was an old trilby hat perched on its turnip head. When the fire was lit, it blazed fiercely for a time, but the material of which it was made was so dry, and the flames soon began to die down. So the boys set off to find more things to throw on it. They fastened ropes around an old tree stump and dragged it to the fire. But the stump was too damp to burn at once, and they decided to go to the derelict greenhouse for something dry to start it off. The boys tore down the shelves of the greenhouse and dragged out the piles of old seed boxes. No. Oh. They were just going to throw the new material onto the fire when one of them saw the old boy curled up in the dry leaves which lined one of the seed boxes. "There's an old fuzzy peg," he yelled. The noise woke the old boar, and he uncurled enough for the boy to grab him by his hind legs. He flexed his back and sunk his teeth deep into his tormentor's wrist. The boy dropped him with a scream of pain, and as the hedgehog fell on the ground, he curled up again, cushioning his fall with his bristles. The boys, until then, had looked on it as a bit of fun, grew angry and spiteful. Holding his injured wrist with his other hand, he kicked out wildly at the old boar, sending him into the heat of the bonfire. "Oh no!" The unfortunate animal uttered a loud, wailing cry of pain as the flames seared into his bristles. Oh no. The cruel boy did not get off scot-free. The teeth of the old hedgehog are often poisonous, and his wrist became infected, and he was in hospital for nearly 3 weeks. Oh no. Look, the snowdrops there and they're drinking milk. The weather was fine and mild until after Christmas. Most nights there was a touch of frost, but the wind blew steadily from the west and the temperatures did not fall very low. At the beginning of January, daffodils and violets were in leaf, and snowdrops filled every hollow. The mild air woke the hedgehogs, and for a few evenings the woman from the bread and milk house found them patiently waiting with their snouts poking towards the plate where their plate used to be put. When she had given them their food, they would run off to hunt in the gardens, but they always returned to their flower pot before dawn. Then suddenly, when the earth seemed to be trembling on the brink of spring, winter struck. The thermometer fell 20 degrees overnight, and the land woke up to a bitter east wind and a black frost. The temperature rose a little during the day, and an inch or so of snow fell. But by nightfall, 10 degrees of frost had turned the snow to solid ice. On the waste, the lake was frozen hard, and the fish sought refuge in the mud at the bottom of the pond. The brown waters of the stream were fringed with ice, and the ground was iron hard. The hedgehogs slept soundly, safe in their nest of hay and leaves, and the woman from the house threw more newspapers and sacks over their flower pot to protect them from the bitter cold. The wind, with ice in its teeth, still blew steadily from the east, and the land cowered from the iron grip of winter. The earth was frozen to a depth of nearly a foot, and the ice had crept along the beaches, freezing the edge of the sea. The birds were unable to find food, and they literally fell from the air, dead of cold or starvation. Many animals of the wild froze to death in their dens, and the old men shook their heads, saying that such bitter weather had never lasted so long in living memory. Then spring came. The wind veered west, and warm air from the Gulf Stream melted the snow and ice. Every gully, every drain ran merrily with water, and the earth steamed in the sunlight. It was late March, and along the banks of the stream which flowed through the waste, daffodils and primroses seemed to flower overnight. The hedgehogs woke up, thin and hungry, after an exceptionally long winter, and fed on the slugs and snails which crawled from their winter hiding places. A pair of blackbirds began to build their nest in the hedge above the flower pot. There was no doubt that the bitter weather was over. Mattie was now quite tame, and she allowed the woman from the house to pick her up and stroke her when she came for her food. One evening the woman foolishly carried her into the house and put her on the rug in front of the kitchen fire. Bewildered and frightened, the hedgehog at once curled up into the ball, but after a while, seeing there was no imminent danger threatened, she gradually uncurled. She was still by no means satisfied that she was safe, and after a quick look round, she darted like lightning into the coal scuttle, and there she stayed, quivering with fear. I'll leave it for now, peeps, and I'll try and read a bit more later.